So today I'm going to discuss adrenal fatigue. I got diagnosed with it in my mid-20s, and the medical establishment couldn't figure it out. Who figured it out? We'll get into that in a minute. What's shaking bacon? I'm going to discuss my adrenal fatigue. Now, it's been much better in the last number of years that I can tell, but I'm sure it's still an issue. To set the stage, so I was built like a man by the time I was 18 years old. So I started bouncing at a very young age. I stopped just before I finished college for massage therapy. I didn't go to college till I was 23, and I ended up doing that till I was 25. And for the last few months of school, I quit being a bouncer. That kind of job is stressful. Now, I didn't find it stressful in the way that my nerves were shot or anything like that, or I was always leaving work feeling stressed about what happened that night or the amount of fights I was in. I had fights usually every night. It was rare a night went by that I wasn't involved in a fight. And the reason why I bring this up is my adrenaline was always going. Even if I only had 3 or 4 fights in a night, my adrenaline went probably a half dozen to a dozen times more often than that. Because when you're doing a job like that, you're always keeping an eye out on your other teammates, the other bouncers. And when you're watching them and all of a sudden one of them's not at their post, adrenaline starts going and you start scanning where they're supposed to be and you're looking for any commotion. And then, you look over to the other guy and the other guy might tell you, oh, everything's okay. Or you look in worst case scenario, he's not there, which usually meant something was happening. So sometimes there were false alarms, and sometimes we had to rush to that fight. So as soon as that guy wasn't at his post, boom, adrenaline would start going. Fortunately, I did that job for a lot of years, and I never got the crap kicked out of me. So I was pretty good at it. And I worked with a great team of guys, and that's a big part of the reason. But anyway, I was always dealing with adrenaline. Usually 4 nights a week, I was bouncing. Now, I worked my way through college doing that. I finished, just before I finished college, I quit bouncing a few months before. So I was stressed all the time with college because it was a pretty intense course. I didn't have a science background. There was a lot of studying, a lot of driving as well. And I was working nights. So not only was it a stressful job at times, I enjoyed the job most of the time I did it, but it was a stressful job because there were moments of stress and your adrenaline would kick in, and your adrenaline is what saved you. But anyway, it was a night job. So I was going to school through the days, and then on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday nights, and often Sundays, I was bouncing at night. So I was balancing a day schedule and a night schedule. And before college, I was balancing that night schedule of a bouncer with my full-time job. So for years, I was spreading myself way too thin. The reason why this is relevant was by the time we got into 2001 and 2002, I was getting this weird sensation every now and then of a fluttering in my chest. And it was like an adrenaline sensation, but it wasn't in my gut. It was in my chest. And what I would feel was something really odd. I'd feel a pounding that would go thud. And then the adrenaline sensation would kind of die off by about 50 or 75%, probably by about 75%. And then I'd feel a softer thud. And then the rest of it would go away. Religiously, that's how it worked. Adrenaline sensation, thud, drops by about 75%. Another thud that was probably half the intensity of the first one, and then it would go away completely. Happened every now and then, and being a young man, I was like, that was weird, and didn't do anything about it, like a knucklehead, but it kept up, and it started happening more and more often. So it got to the point where it was so frequent that by the time I hit the end of 2001 and early 2002, it was happening all the time. Now, I had started seeing a doctor about this, and they hooked me up to a Holter monitor. They couldn't find anything. I was hooked up to a Holter monitor twice, each time for a day. And that's a monitor you put on you. It's got all these wires attached to your body, and they go under your shirt. And the thing, it was like carrying a Walkman around or a CD player on your hip. It records everything. So you have to write down if you did a workout. You have to write down if you just finished eating, if you took a nap, everything throughout the day. And I was getting this sensation anytime through the day. It didn't matter if I was standing, walking, sleeping, sitting, relaxing, doing an intense workout. Anything I was doing was triggering this sensation. The doctors couldn't figure out what it was. The Holter monitor came back fine. They did a bunch of tests for blood work and urine. Everything was coming back normal. So they were like, well, we can't figure it out. And they were just ready to leave it there. And then a few months went by and it was still there. It hadn't gone away. So I went back to my doctor and I was like, look, I don't feel comfortable with this. This is still happening. So I did a bunch of the same tests again. They still couldn't figure anything out. But this time, something changed. When I was at work, and I was working at this naturopathic office. So by this point, I wasn't a bouncer anymore. I had a straight day schedule. I really learned to respect my sleep, to not burn the candle at both ends like I had done since I was 16 years old. I used to work multiple jobs at once while I was in high school. And then while I was working my full-time job after high school at a factory, I was still working other jobs afterwards, usually as a bouncer. So I just worked. And I spread myself way too thin. That was what I was known for back then. So by this point, I was working as a massage therapist for probably about 8 months steady at this naturopathic office. So one day, the naturopathic doctor that I worked with who owned the business happened to be walking down the hallway and he saw me hooked up to my Holter monitor and he said, what's going on there, Bruno? And I said, I've been having these sensations in my chest and I've been getting this adrenaline sensation in my chest, but they can't figure it out. I get these pounding sensations in my chest and then it goes away and then I get it again a few minutes later. And it doesn't matter what I'm doing, I'm always getting them. And he looked at me and went, He said, how's your stress level? I said, it's great. It's the best it's been in years. He said, have you ever seen someone go through a really stressful time in their lives and say it's a sick loved one? And whether they made it or not, or they, if they passed away or they pulled through, that person took a lot of time out of their schedule and cared for them and did everything they needed to. And because they were so close to that person, it wasn't just their schedule that thinned them out and made them stressed. It was also because it was someone they cared for. And so they were under an emotional stress as well, not just a physical stress. I was like, yeah. And he said, you ever notice when that's done, a week later, they come down with the worst flu or cold of their lives? And I was like, yeah, I have noticed that. He said, that's what you went through. He said, you have adrenal fatigue. So he said, what you need to do is start taking high dose vitamin C. And I said, okay, so how many oranges would I have to buy to just get enough vitamin C? And he said, probably about a crate a day. And I was like, he said, just buy the vitamin C from us. He said, you get it at cost anyway. So I had been to a lot of his lectures in that time frame already. So I knew the requirements that he gave his patients when it came to taking vitamin C. And this is what he always highly suggested. First of all, he said, vitamin C is more important in its own category as every other vitamin put together. What you want to do when you take vitamin C, we're one of 5 creatures on the face of this earth that don't produce their own vitamin C. He said, as usual, you take it to your bowel tolerance. When you take it, you have to find out what your tolerance is. So if you take a 1,000 milligram pill, it didn't really have an effect on you, then you take another 1,000 milligram pill. So now you're taking 2 at a time. That doesn't have an effect on you, you take 3 or 4. And once you get diarrhea, back off 1. So if 4 pills gives you diarrhea, you cut back to 3. So I learned in college, vitamin C only stays in your system for roughly 3 hours. I was taking it morning, noon, the afternoon, like 4 o'clock or so, and then past dinner, and then before I'd go to bed. It turned out my tolerance was 3,000 milligrams per dose. Here's the crazy part. After doing this for 1 day, those palpitations in my chest and that adrenaline sensation that I was getting dozens and dozens of times a day by this point in early mid-2002, it dropped by about 75% in frequency. The second day of taking this high-dose constant vitamin C, keeping it in my system, it finished. That was the last time I ever had that sensation. I shouldn't say that. I had it the odd time after that. But I kept up my high-dose vitamin C for probably years after that. And he said, vitamin C supports the adrenal gland. You have adrenal fatigue. So vitamin C is one of the best things you can do for adrenal fatigue. So you can get adrenal fatigue from a lot of different things. You can get it from a lack of sleep. You can get it from being sick. You can get it from being stressed emotionally, physically, mentally. There's so many different ways to stress your body out. Anytime you're stressed, your vitamin C requirements are going to go up. Now, he said, you have allergies too, don't you? And I said, yeah. He said that's related to fatigued adrenal glands too. So you might even notice a difference in your allergies. Now, vitamin C is also an antihistamine. So as of that window of time, I started taking vitamin C for my seasonal allergies. And they used to be terrible. I developed them when I was 19 years old, actually just before I developed hypothyroidism. So I was allergic to cats and dandelions. So the crazy thing is that would normally last about 6 weeks for me. Once I started taking vitamin C, high dose vitamin C, steady, after years of it, my allergies got shorter and shorter. Now I started taking another product called Adrenal Mend. And you can find a product like this at your local health food store. That shortened my allergies from 6 weeks down to only 2 weeks. And now my allergies only last 1 week. And I still take a lot of vitamin C only in that 1 week. But before, I used to take it for about 6 weeks. When I was in my allergy season, my vitamin C tolerance would go through the roof. I would have to take 6,000 or 7,000 milligrams at a time. And I would take those about every 2 hours while I was awake. And sometimes in the middle of the night, I would wake up to take more because my throat would start getting itchy. So I was easily getting between 8 to 9 grams of vitamin C spread out all through the day during my allergy season. So vitamin C is one of the best things I ever did to help my adrenal fatigue. And get this, it was diagnosed in the hallway by a naturopathic doctor when my medical doctors couldn't figure anything out. By the time I saw my specialist the 4th time, I had already talked to the naturopathic doctor and figured this situation out. And when I told him what I did, he just scoffed at it. The specialist said, vitamin C doesn't help you with chest sensations. He just got really condescending and said, vitamin C wouldn't do that. And I said, look, man, I've had this condition for a couple years and it's progressively gotten worse in frequency and intensity over those 2 years. And within 2 days, it went away 100%. So I just shrugged my shoulders like, well, sure, it doesn't. Believe what you want. I know what I experienced. So vitamin C worked great for me. And remember, you take it to your bowel tolerance and it only stays in your system for roughly 3 hours. So you're going to find out when you're taking it, if you can take it every 4 hours or every 2 hours. And you're going to find out when you have a cold or allergy season or just in general, vitamin C is one of those things you don't feel it working while it's in you, but it's doing its job and it's helping the adrenal gland. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video and found it educational. It's just my anecdotal evidence, of course, but it might help somebody out there. So take care. I put videos out twice a week. I record them every Wednesday night and every Saturday night. They come out 7:30 every Sunday morning and every Thursday morning. So they're usually roughly about 10 to 15 minutes long. If I can kind of keep it on the shorter side, that's what I try and do. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Subscribe and give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Thanks a lot and take care.